the SETI Institute Science radio show, Big Picture Science. So he has to talk about this stuff every week. He's written and edited and contributed to a half dozen books. His most recent is Confessions of an Alien Hunter. That's what I want, confessions. A scientist's search for extraterrestrial intelligence. That was for National Geographic. So, coming up in just a few moments is Seth Shostak. He's a great guy, and I've got some great questions for him. This is Dark Matter in the Nighttime. All right, coming up now, the SETI Institute's chief astronomer, Seth Shostak. And, Seth, are you there?
Okay, go on.
All right. Seth, I hate to start it out in such a contentious way, but I have absolute evidence, and this is from two sources, that you're holding on to the big news, that you actually have had contact with aliens and you're withholding it from the American people and the world. How about it?
Well, Art, it's even news to me. That's how successful I've been at keeping this news from making it out there. Well, obviously, if that were true, of course, I wouldn't be here. I'd be in Stockholm collecting a check and a prize. And beyond that, I'd have John.
I couldn't resist. I'm sorry. I had to try. It's good to hear your voice again, Seth.
And yours, Art. Really it is. Good to have you back on the air.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I guess it's like I kind of belong here or something. I don't know. All right. So what's news since we have last talked?
Well, I guess to badly paraphrase Chucky Dickens, it's the worst of times, it's the best of times. There's, of course, there are some new experiments being run in SETI. Big news about planets around other stars. I think a lot of that has developed since we've last talked. Finding planets and finding planets that might support life, and that's the good news. There's some new ideas in SETI. We'll probably talk about those. But the bad news is, as usual, there's not too much money, and that kind of hampers the experiments.
Money is always a problem with SETI, huh?
It is. It's a perennial problem, and I guess the difficulty is, we're here in the Silicon Valley, and people have money to invest in new ideas, important ideas, and so forth. But unlike so many other enterprises, of course, SETI can't guarantee that you're going to be successful in any given length of time or even forever. So I think that's part of the problem.
Do people get angry? I sent you $8 3 years ago. Where are my aliens?
Yeah, well, I've never heard anybody say that. Not at the $8 level. Usually at the $2 level. Yeah.
Exaggerating. Yeah.
Well, yeah. There is some of that. That, doggone it, you guys have been looking and you haven't found anything. And so that must mean either they're not there or you're just doing the wrong experiment. And,
all right, I want to go back, Seth, to a show you and I did together, maybe one of the last ones we did together. And what you said in sort of a kind of a dejected voice was, Art, we're coming up pretty soon on 50 years. And if we don't find something in 50 years, I'm about ready to call it. In other words, it might all be over.
Yeah, I think the comment. Well, I think the comment was slightly different. It's true that SETI is now, it's a little more than 50 years old in the sense that the first, SETI experiment was done in 1961.
Use radio waves anymore.
Or 1960. So that's more than 50
already
years ago. But I think that my comment was that if we didn't find a signal by 2050, or in the next 50 years, I guess it's only 37 years, but whatever, that I would say that would discourage me with the current approach. I would say this is not the right approach, but of course it's not 2050 yet.
All right. That's true. Okay. I thought you had said 50 years is coming up, and okay, so I may have had that wrong. So you've still got a little. Actually, you've got forever. We're either going to find them or we're not going to find them, but I doubt that we're going to stop looking.
I agree with you. I listened to a gentleman today who came and gave a talk at the SETI Institute, and he's not a SETI astronomer. In fact, he designs big optical telescopes with lenses and mirrors, the kind everybody knows about. And he's got plans to develop a big telescope that would allow us to maybe see the lights of alien cities, or at least the heat that they produce. Yeah. And it's an interesting idea. It's a completely different approach to doing SETI. And I thought, he's going to have problems raising the money to get this too. But on the other hand, there are all these new ideas about how you might, track down ET.
Question. You said we might actually see lights of their cities. Now, at what distance?
Well, he's talking about stars that are all within 60 light years. That's 60 light years. And for listeners who don't know, of course, a light year is about 6 trillion miles. So that's 360 trillion miles, which would be impressive on your odometer, I suppose. But that's fairly close. That's our backyard, our neighborhood backyard. But even so, within that distance, they're on the order of 500 or 1,000 likely planets similar to the Earth, we would guess. We don't know that for sure. But, there's there are a lot of planets even nearby. And what he was saying was that, look, with a big enough telescope, what you can see, maybe not the lights from their cities, because they're going to be pretty efficient about lighting. We're becoming more efficient about lighting. But inevitably, they'll be using more energy than we do. I mean, that's one thing that's very, very closely correlated with the standard of living. The higher the standard of living, the more energy you use per person. We all run at about 10 kilowatts. That's what Americans run at. So, he's saying that these aliens, if they're even 100 or 200 years more advanced than we are, their society will be using so much energy that you'll be able to see the waste heat coming from their planet. That's the idea.
Well, I see. And they can distinguish that from, for example, volcanic activity or whatever else might be going on that generates heat on the planet?
Yeah, well, that's an excellent point, because any planet, of course, reflects a lot of heat back into space. I mean, the Earth is receiving, 10 to the 17 watts, so that's 100,000 trillion watts from the sun. That's just sunlight falling on the Earth. And, of course, that all gets reflected back eventually into space as heat. So you got to sort out, okay, is that just heat coming from that planet because it's sitting in its sun, or is that heat coming from the planet because there's a very advanced industrial society there? And he made a convincing case that he could tell the difference.
Did he say how? I hate to press this, but, heat's heat, seems like.
Well, yeah, he did indicate how. I mean, you can assume maybe that their planet is rotating. Our planet rotates every 24 hours. Theirs might rotate in 10 hours or 100 hours, or who knows. But if it's a rotating planet, then you'll see the energy coming from that planet. You have to watch it for a few days, but you would see the energy, the heat coming off it. It'll go up and it'll go down depending on whether a desert is facing you or not. But something like a big city or a big metropolis like, I don't know, the New York metropolitan area, that comes around the planet. It produces a spike in the heat, and then it goes around over the edge and goes away. And by doing various tricks, he can sort out which of those heat signals, if you will, is due just to the topography of the planet, just to the forests, lakes, and deserts of the planet, or volcanoes for that matter, and which of it is due to some sort of fixed structure on the ground.
Okay, let me try this one. Since we're discovering so many planets that are Earth-like, exoplanets, is that correct?
That's correct.
Does it at all discourage you to begin to know that these planets are out there and they're just like, well, not just like, but Earth-like, and yet we don't have a signal yet? I mean, the one is very exciting and the other is, but we don't have no signal yet.
Yeah, well, that's true. On the other hand, how many of those planets that we found, and, the number is, well, there's something like 900 that have been found that are for sure that they're there. But there are several thousand. Yeah, it's 900. Well, 900 is a big number. I mean, consider in 1994 there were 0. So today there are 9. But there are thousands more that have been found by the Kepler Space Telescope, Kepler, that are suspected of being planets. Not all of them will turn out to be planets, but probably 90% of them will. And so there are a few more thousand planets. But how many of them have we looked at carefully for a signal? And the answer to that is not too many. Not too many, a few hundred. So you know, I'm not discouraged by that. I still think the numbers are too small to allow me to get discouraged.
All right. How about this question? You said there are nigh on to 900 planets. Is SETI beginning to focus its antennas toward those planets? In other words, are we going to? Can you specifically point that carefully, that you can point at those planets as, you know, likely targets?
Yes, you can. You know where they are, and so you can aim your antennas in their direction. Now, you know, some of them are in the southern hemisphere. In other words, you could see them if you lived in Brazil, but you can't see them if your antennas are in Northern California, as ours are.
Right. I understand.
So, you know, some of them you just can't get to. But, yeah, the majority you can, and we do look at them. And, in fact, we even have a special project that's looking at the planetary candidates, these ones that are still not confirmed, that Kepler has found. And they're all in one spot in the sky. They're up there in the summer triangle, you know, in the constellation of Cygnus. And, you know, there are hundreds, there are thousands of them, and we've been looking at them, and over a very wide range of radio frequencies. I mean, we're going from a low band to a high band. This would be a, you know, amateur radio operator's dream to have a receiver that can cover as much of the band as our telescope can. So we are looking at those.
Okay, you mentioned Kepler. Kepler, I guess, is in trouble. I've heard that it's now, I mean, this wonderful satellite that has found so many Earth-like planets is dead?
Yeah. Well, I'm afraid it is.
Oh, no. I mean, what happened?
Well, maybe moribunds would be best. Well, what happened is, in order for this thing to find planets, the way Kepler finds planets is it just stares at 150,000 stars all the time. Right? It's just the ultimate staring contest. And what it is, it's just a big light meter, really, like cameras have, you know, light meter to measure the light. It's just measuring the brightness of all of these 150,000 stars. Every 30 seconds, it dumps some more data with the brightness as it was for the last 30 seconds, and it's just looking for little dips in the brightness when a star gets a little dimmer because some planet has crossed in front of it, and that will occur occasionally, and it has occurred thousands of times. So that's what it's doing. But in order to pull this little trick of measuring the brightness of all these stars, you have to be very accurate in how you point the telescope. The telescope has to be pointed very accurately so that you don't confuse one star with another.
Sure.
And to do that, you know, they have little thruster jets on this thing, the spacecraft, but really what they have to keep it very precisely pointed are what are called reaction wheels. And those are nothing more than, you know, spinning flywheels. They're just flywheels, really. And there were 4 of them. You need 3 flywheels. If you want to keep something oriented in 3 dimensions, you need 3 flywheels, one for each of the dimensions. It had 4, a little bit of redundancy. But, you know, some time ago, year and a half, 2 years, I don't remember exactly, one of the wheels seized up. You know, bearing went bad. Yeah, so it was out of action, but there were still 3. But what happened last spring was that a second one failed, and they spent a couple of months, NASA spent a couple of months, you know, trying to free it up. If it was just sticky because the grease got a little cold or whatever, then they could have made it work again. But it looks like there's actual, you know, just physical damage. It's just broken, like when you occasionally break a bearing on your car.
This game bans my nose out.
That's where Kepler is.
That is so sad. What about a mission? Oh, that's right. We can't do missions, can we?
well, yeah. I mean,
that's so sad. That's another subject, but.
Yeah, it is, and besides, Kepler isn't even close. It's not in a near orbit where you could get to it easily.
Well, what did Kepler cost?
I don't know the answer to that. It wasn't terribly expensive. It was in the hundreds of millions of dollars, which would be, you know.
Well, there you go. We should have spent billions.
Well, maybe we should. Well, there's this good news with Kepler. I mean, I will say something here, because even though you can't point it very accurately, you can't use it for finding planets anymore, but it's still usable for other astronomical projects. So NASA is soliciting the astronomical community and saying, hey, you know, can you think of something that you could use a space-based telescope that's really in great shape, except we can't point it extremely accurately. So there's that, plus the fact that there are something like 2 years' worth of data that Kepler made before the wheel quit that's still in the data processing pipeline. So it will undoubtedly, you know, be to discover yet another
Safe.
couple thousand planets. So,
Well, I hope so. If not, then maybe they can sell it on Amazon.
yeah, but it's going to be FOB. I mean, you're going to have to arrange for the delivery yourself.
Oh, boy. All right. I think you probably, maybe, did you hear the beginning of the show, or did they not call you until we were well into it here?
They did not call me until we were well into it.
Okay. Well, I was talking about Comet Ison. Now, there have been, American Indian culture and so many other cultures have this doom thing, this deep conviction that comets, when seen, mean fatal happenings are a-coming, that not good things happen when you have comets. And I was sort of speculating in the beginning of the program, Seth, that maybe there's something deep in our DNA about comets. Maybe early man said, ooh, look at that bright thing, and then, days, weeks, months later, kaboom. Now, I'm not saying that happened, but it is odd that we feel so strangely about comets.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a good question. I don't know if you if you can see a comet for a couple of nights, and talk about it and whatever. Probably that's not one that's going to hit you. But on the other hand, maybe. I don't know. I think it's the combination of ingredients product. On the one hand, anything that's unusual in nature is usually a bad sign, right? I mean, if the waters are rising or something. I mean, if there's something unusual in the backdrop of your life, you're living on the savannas 100,000 years ago, and something in nature changes, that's often bad and not good. So when you look up in the sky, which essentially looks the same every night, now you see something that wasn't there last week. Maybe that's troubling. The other possibility is that it's just all a derivative from this Beirut tapestry, right? In 1066, when King Harold went up, when we lost this Battle of Hastings, whatever, and he had an arrow shot into his eye, as I recall, and Halley's Comet was in the sky at the time, and so people said that this was a portent of his loss there. On the other hand, the other guy might have claimed that it's a portent of his win. So I guess it depends on your point of view. But that's a very famous example of comets signaling something bad, and that's 1,000 years ago. So it's kind of worked its way into our folklore, if you will.
You think that? I'm thinking genetics and some terrible catastrophe. I really am. I think that somehow it's in all of us. Anyway, onward. This comet. Some people say it could be 15 times as bright as the moon, which would be really, really bright. Other people say it could fizzle, and I guess that's the truth. It could go either way, but what do you think it would be like if it were 15 times as bright as the moon? Holy moly.
Yeah, there have been comets that have been that bright in the last couple of 100 years, actually, when people actually wrote this stuff down. In the last 150 years, they could even make photos of it. So
nothing I've seen.
Well, no, not our lifetimes. I mean, there's been some pretty good comets. I mean, Hayutaki and Hale-Bopp, and there've been some good ones. Halley, which I guess was 1981, is that right? Something like that. Halley's Comet was kind of disappointing. Remember, everybody was getting all excited about it. And
I do.
It kind of fizzled. I mean, the problem with comets being really bright, and they can get very bright, is that what determines whether they're bright or not, it's like your kid brother. What determines whether he's bright or not? I mean, it's a combination of their intrinsic properties, how big they are, what they're made of, and all that stuff, but also a lot of things that are, kind of variable, like at what angle is it coming toward you? I mean, what part of your orbit are you in? What part of its orbit is it in? Because at certain angles, it's going to be brighter than others. Obviously, how close it gets to the sun, whether, it boils off easily and produces a lot of gas that, you can see, or dust, things like that. So there are a lot of variables. But people are saying, indeed, that ISON, which is an acronym for the Russian observatory where this thing was found, that ISON will be, by the end of November, maybe beginning of December, will be gosh darn bright. I mean, there have been comets in the past that have thrown shadows, in the way the moon does, and this would throw shadows. You might even be able to see it, in the early morning or late afternoon when the sun is still lighting up the sky a bit.
Well, okay. I've never seen a comet that bright, or even close to that bright.
Yeah.
So if it does get that bright, it's going to be a heck of a topic on the radio. That's for sure.
Well,
how long, out of curiosity, might it stay that bright?
What shit?
Best I can judge, it'll be bright enough to be something you'll be talking about for a couple of months, maybe 2 months, like that, maybe 3. It depends on what you mean by that bright, but these things don't last for a year because they're moving fast and they whip around the sun, then they go back out, and then they just sort of get dimmer and everybody forgets about them. It's the guy who left early from the party. He's gone.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to it. I hope it's a wowzer. I hope it really is a good one. And all astronomers really should hope that, because it gets people interested in astronomy. And let me point out, before we ever touch the subject of UFOs, Seth, that if people are going out every night to look at Iceland, and they're actually looking up in the sky, I'd be willing to wager you serious money that UFO reports go right through the roof during that period of time.
Yeah.
Why?
Doesn't sound unreasonable.
No, because people are going to be looking up.
Yeah, they are. And by the way, I also very much agree with your argument there that it gets people interested in these things. I mean, that's a good thing. I don't know if it'll get them as interested as a good science fiction movie, but maybe it will. Maybe it will.
Well, as a matter of fact, I had to leave today halfway through World War Z, and right now I'm really interested in
zombies,
in those dead people that have come to life. Anyway, Hollywood. Since we're sort of close to all of this right now, anyway, let's ask about Hollywood. Why do you think that aliens, the whole idea of life beyond Earth, is so fascinating to Hollywood?
Yeah, well, and it is. I mean, well, it's fascinating to Hollywood because it's fascinating to a lot of the public, of course.
To me.
Yeah, well, or maybe you don't know, that the National Academy of Sciences has recognized that a lot of scientists, and astronomers in particular, if you ask them, why did you go into this field? Why did you study science? A very high percentage of them will say, well, I saw these cheesy sci-fi films when I was a kid. So they figure that, well, if Hollywood has this much influence on future scientists, why don't we get more of the science right in Hollywood? And as it turns out, I and a bunch of other scientists are kind of on call. Whenever this agency hears about directors or writers or producers in Hollywood that are going to make a sci-fi film, they will occasionally fly us down to L.A. and have us talk to them to try and get the science right.
Your own faults.
What I find is that most of the time they ask you the same questions over and over. What will the aliens look like? Why are they here? What sort of weapons do they have? But on the other hand, that's not bad. Why they're making the films? Why aliens have become so popular of late? I ascribe to the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, because there went all the easy bad guys. So Hollywood didn't have any easy bad guys. You couldn't ridicule any other group of people. You could always ridicule the Soviets. So now, aliens stepped right up and they said, well, we're still here and we won't ask for residuals. So are the North Koreans beginning to ask for residuals? I mean, they're about the only people we have left to, rap on a little bit. They're all gone. So you think that the bad guys now, other than, and I was thinking of that while I was watching World War Z, zombies are absolutely okay to decapitate or slice up in any manner whatsoever because they're already dead. And so I guess aliens are kind of in that category, and they're easy targets to be the bad guys. It's a good point, but this interest of the American people in the world goes well beyond that, I think. It goes a lot deeper, and I think it goes to, we want there to be others, Seth. Yes, we do. We have. I certainly concur with the thought that we have an innate interest in others, if you will. I mean, you can imagine, you're living in some godforsaken valley 100,000 years ago, tribe,
Yes.
and you hear that there may be another tribe on the other side of the hill, and you have, there's real value in being interested in those guys, just like there's real value in being interested in the habits of predators, right? I mean, you watch
Yes, what a goal, what a fucking goal.
They're always making shows
Beast.
about predators, scary-looking things. Never make shows about gerbils. Never.
No, you're absolutely right. All right, hold tight, Seth. Seth Shostak, SETI's chief astronomer, is my guest. Doesn't get any better than this in terms of
Carry on the
about
goal celebration to wind them up.
This is Dark Matter. When I was in music radio up in Alaska, I actually got to introduce the Grassroots on stage. And that was a big deal for me then. Ladies and gentlemen, the Grassroots! The place would explode. Anyway, welcome back, everybody. Seth Shostak is my guest, and we're talking about them. We really are talking about them. Seth, welcome back.
Thanks, sir.
That is what it's going to come down to, in the end, them. By the way, I forgot. I was doing a little research for the show, and I heard that Jill Tarter is retiring, right?
Yes, she has done that, at least from her, if you will, day job, but she still holds the chair for SETI research at the SETI Institute, and honestly, I think she's in the office as often now as she was before the retirement.
Really?
Yeah.
Jodie Foster was modeled on her, right?
Dickhead.
Yes, well, yes. I mean, that's a complicated thing. I think that the Jodie Foster character, Ellie Arroway, in the movie Contact, was modeled on several people that Carl Sagan knew, and one of them certainly was Jill Tarter. There are others that have been mentioned as well that were down the hall from Sagan at Cornell or whatever. So I think it's probably an amalgam of several people. But Jodie Foster's character's father died when she was young. Well, that happened to Jill Tarter. She went into SETI. Well, that happened to Jill Tarter. She had trouble getting money. Well, that happened to Jill Tarter.
Contact is actually, I believe, for sure, Seth, it's my favorite movie of all time.
Really?
I love that movie. I love it. In fact, where do you think "Wanna Take a Ride" came from? You have seen Contact, right?
Yes, I was. In fact, I was an advisor.
Don't you remember when the billionaire was up in the space station and he was talking to Jodie and said, "Wanna take a ride?"
Yeah, John Hurt, right? Wasn't it John Hurt?
Oh, I don't know, but I remember. I'll never forget that line.
Yeah, well,
take a ride.
You used to use it on your show, didn't you?
Yes. It all comes from Contact. Contact impressed me in a way that no movie ever has before or since.
Well, I'll tell you this. Needless to say, have seen the film many times. In the beginning, I considered it a job requirement, actually.
Taste of the film.
But again, as I say, many of my colleagues and I were advisors to the film, and Warner Brothers was calling up essentially every day, to check, mostly fact-checking and stuff like that. They had me take pictures around the SETI Institute to send to them so that the art department could get the sets right. They would ask me questions like, "So, Seth, what does it look like when you fly through a wormhole?" As if I do that every other week. And stuff like that. And they even sent up one of the casting directors who wanted to see what, real SETI scientists were like, I guess. And actually, that was kind of amusing because she's sitting in my office and she says, "All right, I want to meet these scientists and engineers." So I gestured toward the door and I said, "They're out there." And she disappeared for 3 hours. And she came back 3 hours later, and I asked her, I said, "Well, did you learn anything?" She said, 2 things. First, you all have very fancy coffee mugs. So next time you watch the film, pay attention to the coffee mugs. You'll see they're pretty fancy. So she did learn that. And the other thing she said that she noticed was the way people carried their weight around. And I thought, gosh, she's noticed the hierarchy of jobs here, that kind of thing.
Yes.
But that isn't what she meant. She said, you guys are all on, you have sedentary jobs. You're all a little on the heavy side. So if you'll notice in the film, aside from the principals, I mean, I'm not talking about Matthew McConaughey or Jodie Foster, but
right.
all the other techie types, the engineers and so forth, they're all a little bit chubby.
Rotund. Yes, well, I mean, where do you think things like this come from?
Want to take a ride?
I use it all the time. That's where I got it. It just stuck with me, and I thought, want to take a ride? What a great slogan! And so, there you go. I'm just in love with the movie. I'm in love with the book. I've read the book several times as well. It's so well done, and it's actually. Obviously, scientists were there, and they were advising people on, the way to present the whole thing, because it's accurate. And then you get down to the wormholes. Even there, it's a series of wormholes, but it's accurate. I wish more movies would do that. And I'm going to give you my favorite example. I'm a radio operator, and I am so sick of these shows that somebody's using a handheld radio, and you hear, hello? Well, folks, that noise comes after you talk, not before. I mean, where are the advisors on these programs?
You need a squelch advisor, a squelch wrangler. I don't know. I was asked a couple of years ago to be on a panel that was at a conference of the American Association for the Advancement of Science on science fiction and the movies, or science in the movies. And we discussed whether getting the science wrong, as science fiction films so often do, was actually a bad thing. And every time you see the Starship Enterprise go by the camera, you hear whoosh. You hear this whoosh.
Okay, I excuse that, though. I know. I mean, there has to be the whoosh sound.
That's what they will tell you. You can make the scene without the whoosh, and everybody thinks something's gone wrong with the projector. So they have to have the whoosh. And indeed, we kind of concluded that while it's nice to get the science right, it probably doesn't matter for a film like Contact or other space opera. Where it matters is in a medical show, because there you might mislead people who actually, can't afford to be misled about things. It doesn't matter in science fiction, but medical shows, yes.
Good point. Anyway, I would like a little better consultation, especially for something really major. Oh, well, anyway, it doesn't matter. So here's the place that you and I have always come to odds, Seth. I really do think we're going to make contact. So that's not it.
Yeah.
But I think that after we make contact, that you're not going to tell us.
Oh, right.
And I know you, Seth. You would tell me, probably. If they didn't kill you first, you'd tell me. But I'm sorry, I do believe it's the province of governments. If we get a signal, if we've discovered other intelligence out there, it's so big and it's so important that I'm not sure that our government would allow it to be announced until they held it secret for a long time. Let me give you an example. We made a little mistake back in the 60s, and we dropped 2 hydrogen bombs on North Carolina. Had you heard about that?
I did hear a bit of that story, yes. In fact, one of them almost went off, apparently.
Oh, actually both. They came, I guess they had 4 safety features, and 3 of them failed, and the 4th was a low voltage thing. So there were like 3 or 4 volts between us and hydrogen bombs going off in North Carolina. But my point is, they couldn't tell us about that until now, Seth. Now, why do you think that would be?
Yeah, well, I can understand why that would be. You might have problems with deploying nuclear weapons anywhere. You might not be able to carry them around. You might not. You'd have to shut down part of the Air Force. I can imagine that.
Well, Then how come it's okay to say 50 years later? I assume we still tote those things around from time to time, right?
Yeah, right. But after 50 years, you can say, well, that's not something that would happen today, right?
Well, you might say it.
Yes, well, yes. No, I hear what you're saying, but I think that people figure, well, all right, there's been progress in 50 years, right? I suspect that's all there is to that. But did you want me to address your hypothesis here that the government would just keep it secret?
Do you think you're up to it?
I don't know, but well, as you've already stated, I mean, my position is that it wouldn't be kept quiet, and I would say that on both theoretical and actually observational grounds. Here's the theory. The theory is, why would they, or even could they? Because the SETI projects in the United States are not run by the government. Some of them are run at universities, but those are state governments, and they're not really in control of their faculties in some sense. And the SETI Institute is just a private nonprofit. And so, nobody ever checks with what we're saying or what we're doing. But, so there's that. That's the theoretical. And you might not buy that. You might say, you're just saying that, or you're just saying that.
Bastard, yeah.
But I
really do sort of think that. Now, here's a straight-on question for you, Seth. In all the years you've been doing SETI now, how many years?
I joined the SETI Institute in 91, I think.
91, okay. So that's a lot of years. So, Seth, in all those years, since 91, are you here to tell me that nobody in government has ever approached you, like a guy in black, or I'm over-dramatizing this, I don't care. Has anybody in government ever come to you and said, look, Seth, we need to have a talk about the protocols in case you guys find something? Nobody has ever come to you with that kind of statement.
Nobody.
That's so hard to believe.
Well, I mean, I can always tell you. I mean, I can't, I can
Sorry.
on this dictionary over here, but
SETI handbook.
SETI handbook, whatever. Yeah. No, well, that was what I was going to say, actually, in terms of observation.
Idiots.
The premise that if we were to find a signal and the public were to find out about it, they would go nuts. That's the usual explanation for why the government would keep it quiet.
Well, they would.
Well, I don't think they would go nuts because we tried that 100 years ago, right? 100 years ago, people were talking about the canals on Mars, and there was a very reputable astronomer by the name of Percival Lowell, Harvard-trained guy, and he had his own observatory, and he wasn't the only one saying this, that there was this civilization on Mars busy with shovel-ready projects digging up their planet.
Wait a minute, Seth. Wait a minute. What about the big broadcast back then? Remember that?
Well, yeah, that was 1938. That was a little later. But
people went berserk.
Well, some people went berserk. Fewer went berserk than you might think. I mean, they kept announcing this is our Halloween broadcast.
It didn't matter to a lot of people. Martians were chewing up New Jersey, and that was it.
Yeah, well, chewing up New Jersey might be of some concern if you're in Pennsylvania. I mean, that's that's a lot different. Here, Martians are chewing up New Jersey. Okay, compare that with we picked up a signal from 500 light years away.
Right.
There's not a whole lot of danger to New Jersey by picking up a signal from 500 light years away. There's no danger to anybody for picking up this broadcast coming from a satellite, orbiting the Earth. There's no danger. They can tell people. They don't have to tell people whatever. So if you pick up a signal coming from space, I mean, there's no danger there.
What if you pick up a signal from 10 light years away?
Well, that's still pretty far, I would say, 10 light years. That would be very surprising, by the way. That would mean that there are a lot more aliens out there than anybody seems to believe. But it's still 10 light years is, what is it? That's 60 trillion miles. That's a long ride.
It's a long ride, but it's not that long if you can go at or better than the speed of light.
Well, going better than the speed of light is still unproven. Being able to go at the speed of light is not quite allowed either. If you can go close to the speed of light, then it takes you a little over 10 years to get here. That's a long time, but beyond that, they might not know we're here. I mean, how are they going to know we're here? So, but here's the other thing. We have had false alarms And so have other SETI experiments. I mean, there was the WOW signal, right? The WOW signal. Everybody talks about the WOW signal. 1977, Ohio State University. These guys find a signal. The astronomer comes in the morning. He looks at the computer printout. He sees this big spike. I get emails about the WOW signal every week, and he writes WOW next to it. This is the triumph of branding over product, because there were hundreds of other signals, but they didn't have this nifty name. But did anybody from the government descend on the Ohio State astronomers and say, we're going to shut you guys down? Not that I know that. These guys are still walking around. They never said anything about guys in black or any other color. So,
Well, all right. But still, I maintain that
I want to fucking go!
Signal, first of all, everybody go back right away and watch Contact, I'm sure.
Yes! First
but after
Beckham
that,
free kick I've scored.
Be a lot of gnashing of teeth and worse. I mean, even when comets appear, people do strange things, right? You know that. So, if we actually knew there was intelligent life contacting us, my, it would be a big deal. And I just think that if our government, so there's no protocol. You would contact me before you contacted anybody in government. Is that right?
Well, I don't know about that. I can tell you what the protocol. Well, I don't know that they're specifically named in any of these documents are, but I can tell you what the documents say, because a committee that I chaired for 10 years is kind of responsible for those documents.
Fine.
Swinger.
I said fine. What do they say?
Okay. You're sounding skeptical. All right. What they say, I mean, they're on the web. There's no secrecy here, so anybody wants to look them up. But what they say is, first, if you find a signal, check it out. You know, use other telescopes, use other instruments. Make sure it's real, because this is big news. And you don't want to tell the world, hey, we found a signal coming from, extraterrestrials, when it turns out only to be, interference or a bug in your software.
Right. Okay, before we go on, can you do that? In other words, if you get a signal, can you quickly call, I don't know, Australia, Brazil, wherever they have really good radio telescopes for confirmation of the signal?
Yeah, you can do it. You can call them up. You call them up. I mean, they might say, sorry, we got a grad student here who's working on his thesis project. We're just not going to take the time. They might say that.
Brother. No, seriously, if you told them, if you made these calls, because in Contact, they immediately cooperated and verified the signal.
Right. I think that's what would happen. We've never gotten to that stage. No SETI experiment, with the exception, by the way, of a signal called EQ-PEG, which you may know about because it was on your show. That's the only signal that ever prompted somebody at an observatory to do an observation that wasn't doing SETI before. In general, however, you are right. They will, I think, say, okay, we know that the people doing these SETI experiments are, they're reasonable people, they're level-headed, they know what they're doing, they have technical expertise. If they say, we need you to break your observing schedule, whatever it is you're doing for a moment, spend a day or two and see if you find the signal at the same place on the sky and at the same spot on the dial, I'm sure they would do it. They would do it. No problem there.
All right, and you're saying, okay, and that would be done before you called me, right?
Nice.
Yes, because we don't want to shout wolf. We would, cry wolf. We would check it. Okay, so that's the first thing in the protocol. And by the way, this is where Contact is slightly wrong. In Contact, they essentially know right away that the signal is for real. Now, I think that Carl Sagan knew that you won't know for real, that quickly. It's going to take a few days of confirming observations and all that. But, it's a movie. You got to speed things up. So there's
right.
So that's fair enough. So that's what the first thing in the protocol is. Check it out. The second thing in the protocol is let everybody know. And when it says everybody, mind you, it doesn't say,
I bet that's in brackets, with a little star, and you got to read down the bottom of the page.
The formatting isn't that sophisticated. No, it just says let everybody know. But it does give examples of what is meant by everybody. And it doesn't name any names. It doesn't say Paris Hilton or something. What it says is, to let the public know, the media know,
How
the
the fuck
government know.
did we miss that?
I mean, essentially. But the first group that you should let know, and this is just astronomy in general, is the entire astronomical community, because what you want is that every telescope in the world that can point in this direction, that it's doing that, because you want to get all the data.
Right away. Absolutely. I get it. How did you like the way the movie Contact unraveled the SETI signal? In other words, pretty soon you're finding other signals within, then you're finding subcarriers, and you're finding other information. Boom, 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 boom. Pretty soon you've got the machine.
Yeah. Well, I thought that was ingenious. In the end, it turned out to be, what, a 3D hologram or something like that.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
So and what it said in the end was, okay, Earthlings, build this machine.
Yeah, that's right. Here it is. Build it.
Right.
Which was really cool. But in real life, what would you expect? Would you expect prime numbers? Or what do you imagine you might get?
Yeah, prime numbers, the value of pi, all those sorts of things to mark it as a clearly artificial signal. You know, you don't need to do that. That's kind of silly. Prime numbers.
Oh, you just set them up,
because the characteristic of the signal that sets it apart from natural radio noise that the universe is pumping out all the time, you know, quasars and pulsars and all that, is that it's narrow band. That is to say, and you know what this means, but for listeners who are not into radio, that just means that the signal is at more or less one spot on the dial. Right. It's not all over the dial the way natural interference is. Okay, so if you find a signal where it's, you know, one spot on the dial, like an AM signal, it occupies whatever, 810 kilohertz, and it, you know, occupies 3 kilohertz of that, or whatever. A signal that's being made by a transmitter is at one spot on the dial. So if you find that, that's, you know, pretty convincing that it's for real, and you don't have to rely on them sending you a bunch of prime numbers. And in fact, I think that would be a waste of their time. That would be a waste of their transmitter power to send prime numbers, because, well, look, they're likely to be hundreds of light years away. I mean, we don't know, but they're probably not very close.
There's a signal, and then there's a. I guess if they just send a dead carrier, that'd be pretty boring. You've got to indicate in some manner that it's coming from an intelligent source, right?
Yeah. And you say sending a dead carrier, just, you know, a constant tone or something like that, which is what a carrier really is. I don't think they would go to the money of building the trouble and spend the money to build a big transmitter that can communicate between the stars, and we're going to send them middle C or something like that. We're just going to send them this endless tone. I think that they would recognize that, look, we're very far away from these guys. We might be 100 light years, we might be 1,000 light years, whatever it is. Right. Which means that communication is really going to be very tedious, because, you know, you say hello, and it takes hundreds of years to get there and hundreds of years for that reply to get back to them. So I think that they would probably just want to send you a lot of information at once. You know, it's not going to be about conversation. It's about going into a library and reading a book. You're not having a conversation with the author. You're just reading what he had to say. So I think there will be a lot of information, and maybe they'll repeat it. But if they really want you to understand it, if this is a deliberate broadcast and not just, you know, some internal signal that you have to pick up, if it's deliberate, they're going to make it very easy for you to figure it out. Maybe a lot of pictures or something like that.
That'll be the
Pictures would be good, as long as they're not too ugly. All right, hold tight, Seth. Seth Shostak, my guest. He's the chief astronomer at SETI. I'm Art Bell, and this is Dark Matter. Seth will answer questions. He will answer them or else. Anyway, welcome back, and Seth, welcome back.
Thank you.
All right, fine. I'm with you on the 100 light years away. Let's for just a moment, imagine that the signal comes from 1 light year away. Now, are we dealing with a different animal?
Yes. I mean, I'm not sure whether it's animal, vegetable, or mineral. If it's 1 light year away, of course, it's closer. It's closer than the nearest other star. So it's something, I guess, artificial. You know, some sort of crap.
a craft, and it's coming in our direction. So
Spartak Mosky.
Now, would you announce that, or would you run that by some people before you did? And yes, I know you check it out, make sure that it's real McCoy and all that. Now, assuming that's been done, it's a light year away. It's coming our way.
Oh, lovely.
Who do you tell?
Well, I think that would be, to begin with, you don't know that it's coming our way if you're the only one looking at it. Right?
I'm telling you it's coming our way.
Something else.
Okay, well, hire a force. But it will.
You're right. You wouldn't know, really, if it's coming our way. I suppose eventually, though, if the signal continued, you'd find a way to determine where it was going.
You could do this if, well, at 1 light year, it depends. 1 light year depends a little bit on how fast it's moving. If it were moving fast enough, you could you could determine its real motion if you can observe it with high enough resolution, as we say in the astronomy biz. In other words, you can see enough detail to see whether it's moving side to side. Is it moving off to one side or not?
Right. Is it going left, right, up, down? Right. If it's not, then it's coming at us.
Well, either that or that's right, or moving away from us, one or the other.
Or moving away. That's right.
Yeah. But
and that wouldn't be too hard either, because moving away, you would have a certain shift of light, and right?
Yeah, well, there would be a Doppler shift, yeah. But on the other hand, if it's moving away at a steady velocity, as rockets do in space, then there's no change in the Doppler shift, so you wouldn't know. But let's assume you can figure that out, because you could figure it out if the signal were strong enough, if the signal were always on, and you enlisted the help of a lot of radio astronomers and optical astronomers. You have to get a lot of people working on it to establish that it was something coming toward you. That would take a little bit of effort, but I agree with you. You could probably tell, something at 1 light year distance. Even if it's going, I don't know, 100,000 miles a second, which is pretty fast. It's half the speed of light, more. You've got to wait a while before it moves enough either to the left or right before you see that. But okay, maybe you could tell that. Now, what would you do? Well, already you've had to tell all these people in order to even learn what the deal is on it, right? You can't tell that by yourself. You can't. Sure. You just have to get all these other people. And these other people are very often, they're not in the United States or Canada. I mean, they might be, as you say, in Australia or somewhere else. And they might say, well, yeah, okay, by the way, we're telling all our buddies and we're telling the newspapers. I think it'd be kind of hard to keep it quiet. And the only exception to that might be that if the government itself was the one to discover this, then they have obviously tighter control over the flow of information. But, that assumes that the government is better at finding these things than we are.
Okay, then let me try this. Let's say the government found it. Do you have any confidence whatsoever that the government would tell you about it?
Well, they probably wouldn't tell us. The only reason they have, if they have the equipment to find it, they probably don't need us, right? If they have better instruments than we do, why are they going to tell us? I don't know whether they tell us, but maybe what you're really asking is, do I have confidence that they would tell the public? Would they tell anybody, or would they just keep it quiet? And the answer to that is, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if they felt that the military brass figured, we've got to figure out whether this is a danger or not. Then they might say, well, there's no point in getting everybody alarmed yet. Mind you, at a light year, that's still pretty far away. We're buffered by
that means how far you can go at the speed of light in a year, right?
Right. That's
so if they're going half the speed of light, that would be 2 years.
Yep.
So that's not that long. If you've got something sending a signal headed our way 2 years out, I don't think that. I really don't think they would tell us about that. I think they would prepare militarily. I think they'd do a lot of things, but I don't think they'd tell us. Now, I could be wrong, but people, this is a big deal, Seth. A lot of people would be challenged with their religion. A lot of people would think it's end times. They could be right, and so forth and so on. In other words, gigantic changes. So, that's the reason that I've always hassled you about this, because it would be such a monster announcement that I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe everybody would know. Maybe you'd call and say, "Hey, Art, guess what?"
Well, I think so, but hey, I mean, maybe you'll prove me wrong. But this is a different case. If you're talking about something that's clearly artificial and that's physically coming our way, as opposed to a signal. A signal isn't going to hurt anybody. The signal per se doesn't hurt anybody. And again, they don't
Could I
know
make it
that
to Division 3, the highest division I've
Nobody
ever
has to fear
been in?
from tuning in the
Let's find out.
I mean, dark matter,
All right,
fine.
fine.
They don't need to worry.
All right, fine. Let's do this, Seth. Let's say that a signal came from 50 light years away. And we decode the signal, and the decoding essentially says, hello there. We are your makers. We seeded your planet X number of millions of years ago, and we're going to be coming to visit you. But, that's oversimplified, but essentially that's what the message would say. We are your makers.
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah, there was kind of a lilt to your voice there.
well, I'm just trying to make this. We are your makers, and we're coming to visit you.
Yes.
It's like,
I'm sorry, it was simple, I know. The big part of it is we are your makers. That's the big part of the signal. That would be very disturbing.
Okay, the idea that our makers might be deep in space, I mean, that's not crazy. I mean, there are theories. There's this theory of panspermia that's been in the news recently, in fact, because there's the claim by some academics in the UK, in England, who say that they sent a balloon up into the stratosphere here recently, and they collected stuff up there, and they found all this, bacterial stuff, this biology up there, and they say it's coming from space, and consequently we're being rained on all the time by life from space, and maybe that's what seeded the life on Earth. This goes beyond the idea that we might be Martians, because Mars may have seeded us, but that we might be being seeded from a planet 50 light years away, as you said. That's possible, but all you have to do is walk on down to the local Natural History Museum and look at all the skeletons in there, not just the dinosaurs, but, look at everything, and you find that, our skeleton looks a lot like the skeleton of the primates that we came from, which looks a lot like the skeleton from the ground sloths or whatever that they came from. And there's this continuity that goes back as far as you want to go. It goes all the way back at least 3.5 billion years, maybe 4. So if they are our makers, these guys are pretty long in the tooth because they would have had to have seeded the Earth with essentially bacteria, 4 billion years ago. And that's okay by me. I mean, I don't have any problem with that. If they did it, that's okay. Maybe there's a lot of life out there because these guys are actively planting it.
They're way past the iPhone 5S.
Yes, it might be.
Okay, I'm joking around, but really, if they got that one message across that they are our maker,
good enough.
I'm not sure that would be released. I'm really not. It would be so disturbing to almost everybody. I mean, if you look around the world at all the religions and what they say about how we got here, they nearly all have lay it out, how we got here. And almost none of it talks about people 50 light years away. It would be very disturbing.
Yeah. Here's the thing about this idea of panspermia, because it's a legitimate idea, and there are people like Bob Zubrin, who's occasionally on your shows, actually, who think that, this really has legs, that it really could explain a lot of things.
Sure,
and the idea, again, very simple, that life springs up on some planet somewhere, and then, you just occasionally get rocks hitting your planet. That happens to us all the time. And they kick stuff up, just dirt, essentially, into space. Some of it gets kicked very high speed, and it just leaves the planet altogether, and some of that will wander through space and eventually fall on another planet somewhere else, and it might infect that planet. So the idea is that life could come from a distant world by this accidental infection method. One planet kind of sneezes and another planet...
Either accidental or on purpose, either way.
Well, there are people who've said it could be on purpose, that maybe they're Johnny Appleseeds that are busily stuffing life, DNA of some sort into a rocket and sending it somewhere else. Now,
well, I mean, look at us, Seth. If we could do it, we would do it. If we could send life elsewhere, we would do it.
Yeah, and we have done it in a way. We sent it to Mars quite accidentally,
Right.
but we got.
Right.
But Mars hasn't suddenly bloomed with life. It's got to be a good place to send it. But that aside, I mean, how does this change anything? On the one hand, it would be very interesting to know. The only change I can see is that it would mean that we're all sort of related. Right? We might be related to life that's very far away, simply because and that would be interesting. It's sort of like, I don't know, Mr. Spock, right? He was sort of half related to humans, and that's why he looked so human. The other thing is that, of course, that doesn't make any sense because you're talking in panspermia about sending microbes, not humans, from one planet to another. So that doesn't really make sense. But what does make sense is that it might mean that there's a lot of life, because we usually assume
that's terrible.
It's alive. You got to find a planet where it could have sprung up from natural processes, right, and then eventually develop. But if you have a mechanism for spreading it around, then you don't need to grow it from nothing on every planet. You can just infect one planet after another. So that's a good thing.
Infect? That was an interesting choice of words. Infect?
No, I said infect. Yes, it's an infection. Well, maybe that's making a value judgment on life.
Maybe it is.
Ref.
Okay, well, at any rate, where I was going with this is that I don't think you could announce that to people. I don't think you could tell them that everything they believe, and it's a core belief about how man arrived on Earth, is all just wrong, that it's those guys 50 light years out that did it. That would really be a troublemaker, and I wonder how it would be absorbed, assuming they'd even make the announcement, which I don't believe, but I wonder if they did, how it would be absorbed. Would people go wild? Would they accept it? What do you think?
Well, I think that's very close
through
to
everybody,
the
whole defense
has been very frequently asked, and that is, if SETI, for example, were to pick up a signal, how would that affect, for example, our religious beliefs?
Right. Well, I know you, Seth, would accept it, and a lot of people of science would accept it, and they'd be totally okay with it. But there is another group of people out there, believe me, they're out there, that wouldn't accept it and wouldn't want to hear about it at all.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've talked to a number of people about this because it is an interesting question. In fact, it's one of the most interesting questions when it comes to SETI. Not, how do you build the equipment and where do you point the antennas and all that. But if you find a signal, how will that affect us? I mean, aside from these invasion scenarios, which, I don't put a lot of credence into, but there is the effect that that you're not alone, that they're really out there, and you've got an even, more aggressive scenario in which we find out that they, by the way, are responsible for life on Earth. How does that affect our religious belief when suddenly you know this? And that's an area which has not received a whole heck of a lot of attention. Some people have done some studies. There are researchers who've gone and talked to a whole bunch of theologians about it. There are sociologists who weigh in on this. And here's the bottom line as I understand it now.
The old Brookings study. There ought to be something new. Somebody should do something new in terms of looking at this.
Yeah, I think if there are any, sociologist grad students out there, or anthropologists or whatever, they ought to consider writing their thesis about this because it's a wide open field. What I have heard is that if you ask theologians of if you will, the major atomist religions, so those are the ones, like Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and you say, look, what if we knew tomorrow that there's other intelligent life out there? How would that affect the religion? And the answer they'll give you is it's all okay. But if you talk to some of them, they'll say, look, that's what we're saying. But if you're a fundamentalist, you have a different view of this. And all the action in religion in this country these days tends to be at the fundamentalist level. So there may be a stronger reaction there because it really does violate their beliefs. So I think it's an open question, and I think it's a good question.
Okay. I think there should be another study, a good study. And maybe the only way you could do that is to actually simulate it to a large group and see how they handled it. I don't know. All right, here's another one, and this one we'll go round and round with this. I know the way you feel about UFOs, or at least I think I know how you feel about UFOs. You're very skeptical that we have been visited or are being visited on a regular basis. And there's an awful lot of evidence
legs, man.
That would argue with your premise that it just isn't so. I mean, these things are seen all the time. Granted, I'm sure a lot of them are various sorts of aircraft and or weather balloons or swamp gas or whatever. But surely some of this it could be very well could be true. What say you?
Yeah, well, I don't need to state my opinion because you've encapsulated it very well. I have to say...
Swamp gas?
Yeah, swamp gas. I don't even know what swamp gas is. Must be methane. I don't know what it is. It doesn't sound like I'd want it in my house. But
No.
if I was an alligator, I'd have something against swamp gas. It is true that I get emails and phone calls every day, that I'm in the office anyhow, every day from people who are wanting to tell me about either something they've seen, something they've photographed, something they've experienced.
Easy fucking goals, man.
Why are you
flying past me?
An email? Why are you wasting our money looking out there for signals when these things are zooming above our heads? They're everywhere. What's the matter with you?
Are you behind these emails?
No, I just know. I know what you're getting. I know.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, I get many that are very similar to what you just said. First thing I point out to them is that it isn't their money. It's all about private donations, unless they're a donor.
I know. I know. It's just that I've been in this business long enough to know how they're worded.
Yeah. Well, what I say is this. Look, I mean, I can't prove to you that they're not here, but that's not actually what's required here. If you think they're here, then you have to prove to me.
Prove they are.
That they are here. Not necessarily just to me. I mean, certainly not necessarily to me, but to enough people that they're going to stack this up as evidence in the Smithsonian. That's for me, the big criterion. If the evidence is good enough to put in the Smithsonian, then I'm going to say, this looks pretty good. And so what I often will say, I try and help in the sense that I try and think of what might be the explanation for what they've seen other than UFOs. I mean, it could be UFOs, but, if they send a photo, I've done a lot of photography, so very often I can look at the photo and tell what's going on and suggest that to them. I can't say that I've ever been hoaxed in the sense that somebody called me up just as a prank and was making stuff up. All these people who call me, who write me, are all sincere. As far as I can tell, they're all very sincere.
Right.
They're honest folks, and they just want to know. That's all. They just want to know. And very frequently, I can't tell them. I mean, they tell me, I was out with my kid in the backyard, and it was 1958 and whatever.
Yes.
And, there's very little I can say because, there's just not enough evidence to make any judgment there. But what I do say is this. Look, and this is mostly to the people who are, if you will, kind of in the biz of the UFOs. In other words, it's not just that they had an experience. These are people who, are aggressively saying, look, the evidence now is very good. I ask them, give me what you think is the best case. Don't tell me there have been 10,000 reports this year, because there probably were 10,000 reports of ghosts, too. And that's not going to convince anybody. But what would convince them is just one really good case. And that's what I'm trying to get at often when I talk to people in the UFO community.
Oliver Kahn and goals into this fucking idiots.
Give me one, give me two, give me three, but I don't need more than three. Just one good one. And I've just never gotten a very satisfactory answer to that.
All you really need, buddy, is to see it yourself.
Yeah.
I'd love for that to happen to you. It happened to me, Seth, and once you've seen it, that will never go away. It changes you. It happened to me, Seth. I know.
Him battered me. Fuck him, battered me.
A triangle came about 150 feet above me, floating, not flying, defying gravity, or maybe lighter than air, but I don't believe that. No propulsion, but it was moving right along. Watched it go right across the valley. military commented that it was a C-130. In other words, I had an experience of the magnitude that you just flat can't
Sums
deny
the whole
or
game
ignore.
up.
It was either something super secret, and I acknowledge it could be that, but I don't think it was, Seth. And it was just right above me. I could almost touch the damn thing. So, if you had an experience like that, I wonder how you could do your job anymore.
I would switch my job description, I think. Somebody told me once, he said if I thought there was a 1% chance that we were really being visited, then I would spend all my time on that problem. I think a lot of people would. I probably would.
If you saw something of that magnitude, would it cause you to change your focus?
I think so. I hope I'm not so rigid that no matter what evidence you provide, including that kind of an experience, if you will, that I would, no, I'm just not going to believe it. I'm sorry. I just don't want to believe it. I don't think I'm like that, but, others do, so maybe they know me better than I know me.
Okay, what's the best argument against it? In other words, what a lot of people say is that, look, they are monitoring us, and there's a fair case to be made for that. If somebody out there can really exceed the speed of light and could, go wherever they want to go, like in Star Trek, Type 2 or Type 3, whatever.
Yes, chicken
It would make sense, perhaps, that they would check on us from time to time, see how we're doing, see what we're ready for. Is that really so far out?
Well, I mean, that requires speculating a little bit on, alien behavior. And we don't have a whole lot of data, at least to my mind. We don't have a whole lot of data about
Scott
alien
Suback.
To begin with, it presupposes that they find us that interesting. And you have to wonder, do you think the dinosaurs
lucky,
are
mates.
sitting
You
around
are
thinking,
lucky.
They probably know we're here, and they want to just monitor us. But we think that about ourselves. But look, if they want to monitor us, they can do that, as long as they're not so far away that they can't pick anything up. But if they're within 50 light years or 80 light years or something like that, then they don't need to send spacecraft here to monitor us. They can just watch our television.
Well, it all seemed to begin in earnest sometime after we exploded the first atomic bomb. Now, I'm not saying that caused sudden visitations, but if you look at the record of ufology, it did seem to spike after we exploded an atomic bomb. Hold tight, Seth. I've got to do something very quickly here. I want to talk to you about the super Wi-Fi antenna. If you're a trucker, I really want to talk to you about it. If you're just at home, listen very carefully. This thing is amazing. When I say it'll boost your Wi-Fi signal at home or in a truck or a car, boosting it doesn't do it justice. When you plug this thing in, it's just a USB that you plug into your computer. And even if your computer now has Wi-Fi, believe me, you want this super Wi-Fi antenna. I mean, we're talking about 2 or 3 times as far, or 4 times as far. Let's say you're in a truck. You're at a truck stop somewhere. You want a good Wi-Fi signal. You plug this baby into your computer, USB port, and boom! You're seeing and getting good, solid signals from very far away. And if it's open Wi-Fi, of course, you can use it, right? Hundreds of feet. More.
Me like gasoline. Right. See you later. No more pairs today. Thanks for watching. Nobody. No one's watching. See you later.